Well, good morning. This message began down there on the floor on April the 13th, 2008, when I came back from surgery. It's my first service back in the church, and I was here worshiping, and Bill decided that he would whack me, and he did. And I ended up, although I had a scar down the middle of my belly, crunching on the floor for a little while. But all Bill was saying over me was two words, and he repeated them probably 10 times. He probably doesn't remember. But he just kept going, divine order, divine order, divine order, divine order. And for 4 years, that phrase has buzzed around in my head, and it's just the way that I live. I tend to have conversations with God around a few words and say, what might this be? And I got to a point recently where I started to realize, okay, I think I've got enough to start unpacking this, and I'm privileged to get to do it amongst you. And I actually do have a plan in mind, and that is that I blow up in your heads any concept that you've ever had that divine order is ducks in a row. That it's anything around that kind of a picture. I want to blow up in your minds anything that makes you think that in any way it might be inanimate, that charts and things might be a part of it, but it's not about that. I want to wreck that image in your head forever. I mean, that's basically my goal. And to unpack, I think, something that I believe has an implication for a movement. We are a movement. We're a part of a movement. And honestly, I was in England recently. I was in Scarborough, England, at a meeting. And I stood at the end and I said, I am not going to talk about this country anymore except in the context of this is a country in revival. And I'm not going to talk about what we're a part of anymore apart from in the context of we are in revival. We haven't seen all we believe we'll see. We are not in yet, as it were, worldwide revival at one level, but another level, we are in revival. And this is a movement, and God is showing up in unprecedented ways. I was talking to an Indian pastor yesterday. He said 36,000 people every day are giving their lives to Jesus in India. This is happening. The streets of our cities have people on them who are ministering with power and authority. A team were recently with a police officer in the centre of London, one of our BSSM mission teams. They went on live raids, a live brothel raid with stab vests on, because the chief of police had the courage to send them out there. So while an arrest is taking place, people are ministering. That sounds like revival to me. That sounds like people's eyes and ears are open to a God who wants to touch lives in every sphere, corner of this great planet of ours. And I really do believe that that's where we are. And I believe that in that light that I have something to say which is related to movement and sustaining movement. I wanted, in my head when I was running through it, I had the phrase, we're in an unprecedented moment, and I realized that's not true. I believe others have actually been in moments like we are in before. I believe that they have seen, and we know that. We read about them, but there has been something that has happened to revivals and to movements, and for me, divine order may be one of the keys that we need to understand so that we don't end up with a revival that one day is forgotten about, that becomes a victim of the routinization of revival or charisma, that atrophies and dies. And that's, I suppose, a fairly big task that I want to go after, but hey, we have a big God, and apparently he likes to hear me talk, so. My problem down there was, yeah, he's British. He always speaks to me with a British accent, Although it's getting a little more Californian just lately. It's weird. When Bill prayed for me down there, I knew what it wasn't. That's all I can tell you. I knew what it wasn't. But I had this kind of beginning, some emerging thoughts about it. And really what I want to say is I believe that divine order exists in a place of tension. And that that is something that is really essential for us to understand. Now, we pray a lot around here for wisdom. Bill leads us in that. He's often praying for that. And I believe with all my heart that we need wisdom. But I believe that in that understanding of asking for wisdom, it's really important that we understand what we're asking for. Because when we ask for wisdom, we're asking for the wisdom that is in Proverbs chapter 8. We're asking for a wisdom that says, when you ordered the heavens, I was there. So when I ask for wisdom, I am asking for wisdom that has identity, pre-existed, has observed, as it were, all things. And that wisdom, it says in Proverbs, was there when God ordered the heavens and the earth. That's the order I want to understand. Without any shadow of a doubt, that's the order I want to understand. And for that, I do believe we need wisdom. And we need to ask for wisdom. But we're asking for a wisdom. You see, wisdom has identity. Wisdom shouts in the streets, it says in Proverbs. She shouts in the streets. Even has female identity, so that's a fun one. She shouts in the streets, and she takes territory. That's the wisdom we're asking for. And this wisdom was present in heaven. And as I started to look at some of the aspects of that word ordered, I began to see that the word ordered used in Hebrew is a whole bigger word than I'd ever understood. But one of the aspects of that word is the preparation of earth and heaven for us. That's the order that was existing. That's what happened in heaven. That's what wisdom observed, was that order taking place. So that, by way of some sort of just a brief backdrop, I believe that wisdom is actually stewarding glory. If you think about the word wisdom, wisdom, wise dom. It's the dominion, it's the territory of the wise. It's the territory of those who have received from heaven the wisdom, the knowledge, the understanding of how things were created and brought them down here, and they begin to take territory. Because a kingdom is the king's territory. So wisdom must be the territory belonging to the wise. And wise is not just, as it were, something that I learned from a textbook. The wisdom that we read of in the Bible, it's more like the way we interpret knowledge. Knowledge isn't just information. Knowledge is living, it's intimate, it's reproductive. It's the same with wisdom. It has that same feeling to it. Wisdom's alive, has identity, pre-existed. It takes territory. It's not just something you get from a textbook. Now, at times in my journey, I'll be honest, I've said, well, is there such a thing as divine order? There's not a verse in the Bible that says, divine order. But it's like, well, there must be. Divine is of God, and there's tons of order in the Bible. And there's the order in the Bible that I've just quoted in Proverbs 8. That wisdom observed the ordering, the preparation of the heavens and earth. So there is this sense of order in the Bible. Now, I've already just said this, and if you just track with me, I just want to jump onto this tension issue for a minute, because it's a big deal. And in many respects, it's probably the key thing that I'm going to end up majoring on. See, when we talk about tension, there is a tendency to some extent withdraw from that word. And yet is absolutely essential for life. Without tension, you're dead. Like Matey in the video from Danny yesterday, Johnny Q. Without a pump, acting under tension, pushing blood around a body, you're dead. Physically, you're dead without tension. You need tension in your body to get the oxygen out of the air, to get the carbon dioxide out of your blood. You need tension to get the nutrients out of food, etc., etc., etc. And physically, your body completely relies on tension. You cannot move forward without tension. Relax. Tense a muscle, relax a muscle. It's the very way in which we've been created, and we need tension to live. All movement, I'm going to go about 99.9% certain, in case there's a scientist here who says, well, there is this just one type of movement that you hadn't thought of. But all movement requires tension. All movement, yeah. Just stop that email right there. No, I covered you in that 0%. All movement, mechanical movement, Chris was a mechanic, it requires tension. A car requires tension. It requires the internal tension of the internal combustion engine. There's fan belts and drive shafts and all that kind of stuff. There's tension mechanically for movement. All movement requires tension. It requires opposing forces acting in partnership together. No animal, no human being lives without tension. Mentally, every one of you right now in here is in tension. Every one of you could access in a moment good news and bad news. My definition of mental health is the ability to have competing emotions hitting my brain and take responsibility for my actions. That's a very simple definition. But what it will tell you is this, that my mental health depends on tension. I will never forget that Sue and I stood here on a Tuesday in May 2008, and we were leading a memorial service for one of our heroes, an M.L. Johnson award winner from our School of Ministry. He made a choice to not abort a baby because she had cancer and ultimately went home to be with the Lord. Kay. And we were here and we were ready to do whatever, and we were waiting to see if Bill could get on video chat from Mexico. We didn't know whether it was going to happen, so we were prepared. And Bill came on. And he said, it says in the Bible, rejoice with those that rejoice and weep with those that weep. Because sometimes you have to. That's the best commentary on that verse I'll ever hear. You see, there are competing emotions hitting our brains. And our ability to be responsible for our lives depends on our ability to live in that tension. To not go this way or that way. The bipolar used to be called manic depressive. That's a good way of describing a mental illness. I'm extremely happy, I'm extremely sad. I can't find an equilibrium. It's typically not that person's fault. There's often chemical stuff going on. But it's a good description of that problem, the inability to take responsibility for their actions. So physically, we live in tension. Mentally, emotionally, we live in tension. Wouldn't it make sense that we would live spiritually in tension? I believe it will. It does, and I'll unpack some things. So much of life is the result of tension. Your hunger pangs that might be starting to kick in now are the result of tension in your body. The result of your body sending messages saying, I don't have enough of this, I need more of that. So tension is a critical and crucial part of our lives. Physical, emotional, spiritual. I put that in the context then of this earth in which we live. And I began to see that the greatest attributes of the kingdom are manifest in tension. The greatest. You don't need hope when everything's going right. You don't need faith just after the blind eye opened. You don't need love, as it were, supernatural love, on your honeymoon night. Spirit of Chris, stay away, you know. So. The greatest attributes of your Christian life exist in contrast. The greatest scenarios in the Bible exist in great contrast. The earth, chaotic and void. Let there be the total opposite of that. Let there be the very extreme to that. The absolute, the ultimate opposite. Let there be light and order. Order is created. And once on this earth, this is one of those thoughts that I just like messing with my head about. Once there was nothing on this planet made by man. Nothing. Nothing on this planet made by man, and God hid it for us to discover. One of the verses Bill often uses. The glory of God to conceal a matter, the glory of kings to search it out. And we've done some serious searching out. It staggers me when I think that everything that we see was either dug up, created in a laboratory, bred or grown. That the massive aircraft carriers, those huge great planes, it was dug up, it was hidden for us to discover. God hid it for us to discover. That's the kind of order that God put in place. Not ducks in a row. But this incredible, mysterious dance between man and God, man and heaven, to discover what He had hidden for us to find. But somewhere in our thinking, I think we have tended to go, oh, as soon as somebody says that order word, it's like, oh, shut down. That sounds boring. That's like, lines and boxes and everything in its place. That's called prison, actually. I know. I worked there, by the way. I didn't live there, just in case you wonder. The mystery, the mysterious way that He created this planet is the order that He prepared the planet with. I mess around with some cooking in my life. I love to cook. I love to eat, so I learned to cook so I could eat, basically. But I'm going to give you a kind of an illustration. I hope it works for you. So you can take, I know Benny will, just cover your ears for a minute, Benny. You can take flour, butter, sugar, and eggs. Yeah. Well, I'll leave the bacon for the minute, but it depends what order you put those ingredients together, how you mix each of those ingredients with each other, how much liquid you add, what kind of oven, what kind of temperature, or whether you don't use an oven, whether you end up with pancakes, biscuits, cake, or whatever. I have a feeling that's more to do with divine order than anything else we've kind of visualized, because God hid it for us to discover. Flour and water fascinates me. Why? Because you can go to any nation in the world, and bearing in mind that, of course, flour and water makes bread, basically. And God gave every tribe, He gives them flour and water, and they mix them up differently. You get naan bread and pita bread, chapatis. You go to San Francisco, you get sourdough. You go to Ireland, you get soda bread. Well, you get where I'm coming from. See, the same ingredients, but different people in different times, in different places, in different seasons. They put them together differently. They bake them, they cook them, they serve them differently. They're the same ingredients. I think that's kind of more what divine order might be about. And I'm going somewhere with some other things, just messing around with a couple of fun illustrations. Because I like to cook. I want to propose to you that divine order exists because of the energy released by tension. I want to propose that divine order exists because of the energy released by tension. You see, the physical tension, the mechanical tension, the emotional tension, the spiritual tension releases energy. And that energy is ours to do with as we will. And I'm going to explain a couple of things in a minute. Let me just spend a couple of minutes, though, on spiritual spiritual, supernatural tension. My favorite story for this, I've probably shared it before, but it's in Kings. It's the lepers. It's the worst of times, and the lowest socioeconomic group are there, the lepers. A donkey's head is selling for a fortune. A bucket of dove's dung is equally expensive. Don't even go there before lunch, what you do with it. It's not worth it. We'll go back to the butter, flour, eggs, and sugar. It's much better than that. But it's expensive, yeah? And the man of God is at the gate, and he says, about this time tomorrow, if the bishop was here, he'd sing it, but my wife would, I don't know what she'd do if I started singing. Well, I do, actually. That's the fear, really. That's the worry. I really do know. The man of God says, about this time tomorrow, everything's going to be all right. And the lowest socioeconomic group hear the prophetic word, and they sit there and they go, we got three options. We could sit here and die, go in the city and die, or we could get off our butts and go over to the enemy's camp. And the worst thing that can happen is that the enemy will kill us. And they end up being the ones that plunder the enemy's camp, and they become the solution to the problem. And it came out of a tension. What was the tension? They were here, and the word of God was here. How many of you have a prophetic word right now that is completely different to your current circumstances? The rest of you need one. If you don't have prophetic words that are different to your current circumstances, they are merely information about your life. That's all they are. I'm helping the prophet out for a while here. It creates a tension. It creates a tension. And in that place of tension, an energy is released that causes us to do something. I wouldn't say I've always done this, but I've tended to wait for my prophetic words to come to pass. I've tended more in that direction. Until, to be honest, a few weeks ago, when Mario gave me a prophetic word. And at 54 years old, I got given a new gift. Now, it took me completely by surprise, but I've decided to pursue it. I am not waiting for this one to happen because I'm 54. And that prophetic word was that I would lead signs and wonders crusades, see souls saved, and I would raise up young evangelists. You know, at one level I don't have a clue what to do. At another level I'm just going to go after everything I know to do. And we're actually already developing some stuff, and there's some things going on. But the kicker for me was this. He said, God is going to give you what you originally came into the kingdom for. And I was called to the ministry in Southampton Central Baptist Church. In 1975, an evangelism explosion trainers meeting led by a man called the Reverend Vic Jacobson. And at that meeting, I heard the call of God on my life, that I was called to ministry. And I did what I did, and I have no regrets because that was what I was meant to do. But when he said he's going to restore that, I knew that that was that. And somehow those two things were absolutely connected. I believe we're meant to pursue our prophetic words. Of course, there's some that it's harder to, but I believe there's meant to be something inside of us, this tension that's been released. You see, I mean, look elsewhere. This one's kind of for Brian and Eric and Bill. You see the bow, the archer's bow. It's kind of the same thing as the cake. You take, say, some wood and some strings and a bow, or just take some wood and some strings. You can make an archer's bow and arrow, or you can make a violin. Yeah, I mean, if you're good, you've got to be pretty clever to do this. But there is actually a top violin maker in Reading, believe it or not. It's one of the top 100 violin makers in the world. Would you believe that? Did you know that? You should get Pat to take you in there, Pat Tennant to take you in. Oh, my word. He hand makes violins. Stunning. Absolutely stunning. I actually think it's kind of got a prophetic significance. What's my point, though? The violin and the bow, once created, they both require tension. There's an interesting couple of illustrations because, to be honest, what I think happens here, Sunday by Sunday, is that Bill, Chris, and others, they calibrate and tighten the strings on either the bow or the violin. They make sure that week by week, I'm able to fire my arrow or play the song of my heart. But in the natural, that bow, if that bow isn't strung correctly, you can't fire that arrow. If that violin is not strung at the right tension, it will sound like me singing. And it's not a pretty sight. Chris has to stand next to me every Sunday. You have to pray for him in it. We need tension. We need tension. And what happens week by week in this house is that as it were, our strings are tightened so that we're able to fire that bow or play that violin, so that which is as it were, the ammunition of our heart is fired with the full force and potential, or the song of our heart is played and is sung with the melody and the harmony of heaven. One of the mistakes we tend to make in life is that we think that peace is somehow the absence of tension. But I think that Brian would probably agree with this, that peace is probably the most beautifully constructed and balanced archer's bow with a perfectly balanced arrow, held by a skilled hunter who has the strength to pull that bow back and aim it absolutely perfectly. And that's a greater picture of peace than the absence of tension. That peace is the ability, as it were, to harness all of the resources at one moment and to use them to their maximum potential. See, what happens in this house Sunday by Sunday is that the apostle and the prophet create tension. They do. But the problem with man is that man doesn't like tension. And we shut it down. But it happens. But the interesting thing is with the apostle's message, the apostle creates a tension because he's seated in heaven and he's looking down to earth and he goes, heaven looks like this, earth should be different. Make it different. Change it. That's your assignment. It's the apostolic assignment to make earth like heaven, heaven on earth. And so he brings every week a tension, every week. He's stretching our strings and bringing a tension. The incredible thing, though, with the apostle's message is this. With the apostle's message, he not only creates the tension, but he brings the culture which is able to sustain the tension. He brings the relational culture. You see, what we've had in the past is the denominational kind of model, the divide model. If we don't agree, we divide. But the apostle brings a relational government. A relational government which creates within it the ability for us to sustain the tension because it puts relationship before our agreement. So the apostle brings the tension, but he also brings the message that creates the culture that enables us to live in that tension. And remember, that tension is essential because the tension releases the energy which will enable the divine order to happen. And so too the prophet. The prophet, week by week in this house, brings tension. I know some of you will laugh differently at that, but he brings an incredible tension. Chris does. He's changed my life. There's no two ways about it. And he's the first spiritual father that my wife has ever had. He's not let her down. That's a good sailor right there. It's absolutely true. She shares it often. What does Chris do? He brings the prophetic word. He brings the prophetic word that creates a tension. Earth looks like this right now, but God says there's chaos on earth. But God says. He looks at your life. He scans his eye around as he did to us, sitting just where Dave and Debbie Crone are there on the first time I ever sat in this church on a Sunday night, and says, you two stand up, and gave us a prophetic word. And there we are, struggling with some stuff, trying to make sense of some chaos in our lives. And he goes, and God says. And he created a tension. And he put in front of us an impossible scenario, an impossible picture compared with our life circumstances. But the incredible thing is that the true prophet not only creates the tension, but he brings the culture that enables the person to fulfill the assignment of that tension, because the prophet brings an encouraging culture that comforts, builds up, and encourages consistently, that enables me to go, I'm scared, I can't get there. And He's created a culture where everyone around me is saying, you're amazing, I love you, you can do it, you can get there, you can do it, come on, get on, press in, you can do it. You see, the prophet and the apostle create the tension, but they create the culture that enables us to live with the tension. Do you want more energy in your life? Do you? Some of you aren't too sure. If you want more energy in your life, learn to live in tension. Oh, learn to live in tension. Learn to live intentionally. The word's related. It really is. If you study intention, it means to stretch out beyond yourself. If I live intentionally, I'm stretching out beyond myself. I'm living intentionally for that spot out there. I'm intentionally going after that. If I need to get better at this or better at that, I'm beginning to live intentionally, and I've set something out there. I've set a stretch. I've set a vision. I've set a goal, and I'm living intentionally. If you want more energy in your life, live in tension. There'll be no moment probably in our lives that we felt more tension than Heathrow Airport on September the 15th, 2001. With 2 bags each, a 1-year visa, enough money to live for a couple of years, and hugging our 18-year-old son on the side of the road. With half the world saying you shouldn't go to America, and us flying into the storm. But it's given us the greatest energy in our lives. I don't know any other source of energy in our lives. I just don't. There isn't. There's no other moment in our lives like that one. The Bible, if you just skim through the Bible, you'll find a ton of examples of this contrast of tension, of rejoicing and weeping. You'll also find another picture, a picture that I think is highly prophetic, and it's the picture of the river in Ezekiel 47. Now remember, I said at the beginning that all movement requires tension. All movement requires tension. And it says in Ezekiel 47, everything that moves will live. Everything that moves will live. And there's the contrast there, isn't there? There's the river that keeps on moving, that keeps on flowing. It actually requires tension for a river to flow. It's the tension of height. It's the pressure, the gravitational pressure that takes that river. It's flowing, it's flowing, it's flowing. And there on the side is a swamp where nothing lives. It's because there's no movement. It's because there's no life. And if there's no movement in our lives, then we end up atrophying and dying. It literally happens. If I was to go to bed for a year, my muscles would atrophy. And I would need some serious help. That picture, I believe, in Ezekiel is a profound picture. I believe it links into what Danny was saying yesterday morning. Because that generation that we're passing everything on to, we need to give them permission to go and get some water for themselves. And not to have our recycled river water, but to go and find that fresh stream that flows through their lives and joins with our life and flows and becomes this river that gets deeper and deeper and deeper, where there's leaves for healing and there's fruit and there's fish, and everything that moves lives. You see, if we want this movement to continue forever, we need to keep moving. We just need to keep moving. We need to keep our lives in tension between heaven and earth, and yesterday and tomorrow, between the testimony of yesterday that we want to see repeated and the prophecy of tomorrow. And there is this place, I believe, where divine order exists between heaven and earth and yesterday and tomorrow. And it's held in a place of tension right in the middle. And it's divine order. And it's not ducks in a row. And it's not dead. And it's not inanimate. In fact, I would suggest to you that divine order is not ducks in a row. It's more like a skyscraper, an elephant, a rocket, and a penguin. Or any combination. Because God takes those pieces and He puts them together. The same, isn't it? I mean, my kids laugh at me, but that cooking illustration, honestly, I really do want to meet the first guy that was walking through a forest that saw an oval object drop out of the rear end of a chicken. He took it and he cracked it open. He threw away the white part, the yellow part. He whisked the white part with some sticks. He went and found some sugar cane. It was really healthy when he did it, I'm sure, Benny. It was really good stuff. He went and found that, and he beat it up until his arm was dropping off, created a meringue, and he slow cooked it in a little oven that he dug out of the ground there, and he called it a meringue. If you don't think there's a glory in food, that is glorious. That kind of discovery is stunning to me. There's so much, there are so many examples of tension in the Bible. The tragedy is that the psyche of man wants to shut it down. You shut it down. We close down tension, and the trouble is, if we close down tension, we remove the energy which is capable of fulfilling, as it were, the divine order which is meant to be happening all around us. We remove the tension. And I believe it's been one of the tragedies of moves of God, that they have shut off the tension. They've been afraid of the tension of the criticism, afraid of the tension of not knowing the answer to everything. I could almost make this message just a Bill quote message, to be honest, but I make no apology for that. But none of us will ever forget the day that I think we first heard Bill say that this is a mystery. In this case, it was cancer. And this is the revelation of the goodness of God. I don't understand this cancer piece, but I will not sacrifice this revelation of His goodness on an altar of human reasoning to give myself an answer to a mystery I do not understand. I never forget him saying it. I leant forward on a seat somewhere down there listening to that, and I'm like, oh, that is genius. But you know, if you shut down tension, you shut down that. You shut down that living between the mystery and the revelation. You close it down, and you end up polarized to one side or the other. And we've done it with moves of God time and time again. And we've ended up closing them down, being afraid of the tension, not being willing to live in mystery, not being willing to stand and say, I don't really have a clue what's going on right now, but there's a load of sparkly stuff over there. Let's worship. But the tendency has been that we would close things down, go into denial. My youngest son, he's a bit of a wit really, but he's head coach of Simpson Soccer now, which is wonderful, and I'm really proud of him doing that. And he was talking to some of the guys at Simpson, and they were saying some things about Bethel, and he said, look, guys, if you want to talk about it, talk to me, you know. And so he went to the back of the bus, and they said, well, tell us about the glory cloud. He said, all I can tell you is I've seen it. That's it. That's all you need. I mean, the trouble is, as soon as you embark any further, you start to try and create an argument for something that we do not understand. You see, living in tension means that we're going to have mysteries. Living in tension means that there are going to be places in our lives where we risk having a disappointment with God. If we live in tension, those are the risks that we are going to take. We are going to risk being in scenarios where it is possible that we could entertain a thought, which hopefully we can deal with quickly, of being offended by God. If we choose to live in tension. But this psyche thing, what man does, it polarizes. I actually think it's a lot to do with political and religious spirits. And we polarize. And the religious spirit camps over here. and ends up in elitism, which Paul talked about in Philippians. He talked about conceitedness, which is that, I think. I opened the Bible, as Bill would say, let's make it legal. It's a good moment to do that. He said this, somewhere around, do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit. And the empty conceit is that religious spirit that it's like, which separates, like, ends up judging and saying, that's not God. And shuts down the tension. And here's what happens, the religious, as it were, that religious position over here, they have access to the same energy. But they take that energy and they invest it in being elite. And they use the energy that was meant to be here to discover what God is saying here and now for this moment. Are we making biscuits, pancakes, or whatever, in other words? We've had those ingredients yesterday. We made biscuits yesterday. Well, maybe you're not going to make biscuits today. Maybe we're going to make a cake today. And they use that energy that's meant to discover what God is saying, the divine order that's meant to come in that moment, and they use it over here to be elite and to stay aloof and to judge and stuff like that. And I'm not, when I say they, I mean, to be honest, I mean, that's me. I've been there. I've been part of that. And some of you probably have. And then the other extreme, you have, as it were, the political spirit that divides, which is often to do with selfish ambition. And it's clearly linked to the fear of man, but wanting the agreement of man. Doing things to please man. So you end up with the political spirit that uses that energy that was there to stay divided. And the tragedy of the history of the church and moves of God and revivals is that instead of staying here in the tension between heaven and earth, between testimony and prophecy, standing here and saying, I have mysteries in my life, we go over here or we go over there. And the energy that was available to keep this movement sustained is used and invested in order to keep us separate or elite. And Paul said, do nothing from empty conceit or from selfishness. We need to learn to live in tension. We're standing at a moment in history. I really do believe it. But I believe that the good news is that we're learning how to do something. And we're learning how to do relational government. We're learning how to really do relational government. Bill messed me up in 2005. He told me, heaven's government's family, Paul. I went away and spent months thinking about it. It's such a part of global legacy and what we've sought to build. I love that I can be in the room with 20 different streams and more. See, the problem in the past has been that we've divided. We've allowed the political spirit or the religious spirit to separate us when we should be united. Ephesians chapter 4, the fivefold are given to perfect us in unity. But the tragedy has been that in many instances, they've caused the division and they've caused the elitism. The greatest challenge I believe we face, a piece of it Bill said recently, is that I am able to maintain my distinctives but live in relationship with others. I want to risk saying this, that the key to the transformation of your city and your nation depends on your ability to live in tension. That I don't need to agree with a brother, a sister, because relationship has come in front of that. Jesus said we would be known for what? See how these Christians love one another. And Jesus prayed to the Father, glorify me with the glory we had before the world was. And what was the end result of that? That we would be perfected in unity. And the tragic history has been that we're famous for protesting and dividing instead of loving and uniting. And I'm not saying that we sacrifice our distinctives, but what I'm saying is that we learn that it's relationship first. That we learn that we can actually do this, that culture that the apostle brings, the relational government that he brings, is actually the key to us living in tension. That we don't need to shut down that tension. We can stay there, we can live there, because in that tension is the energy required to bring about the divine order that he has purposed for this moment in time. And that divine order is different. It's different. That's why the cake illustration kind of works. The bread illustration works. I can give flour and water to Latvia and they'll make something different to flour and water to India. But that's the divine order for them for this moment. As they stand, as it were, in the tension between heaven and earth and yesterday and tomorrow. And their place in history is unique. The mistake has been that the Western world has often sent missionaries and said, you should look like this. But they weren't ready to look like this. That's why the more we understand divine order in the context of heaven and earth and yesterday and tomorrow and the geographic location and the people involved, that we are going to begin, I believe, to allow that tension to release an energy that causes people to gather together, united together, in cities and in nations, that will put aside their differences, as it were, and will realize that before that difference comes a relationship. Every message, every reformer's message has the potential to undo itself. Every reformer's message has the potential to undo itself. Any reform message pushed too far has the potential to undo itself. Every reform message has to live in the divine tension which enables the divine order. And the environment that we get to do that in, Danny was sharing about yesterday. It's the relational government. I taught a message called Heaven's Relational Government some years ago. Chris said last night, there are all these keys along the way for me. Chris said last night, we're going to a wedding. Yeah, we're going to a wedding, we're not going to an election. That's really good news. Jesus didn't come as a religious leader or a politician. He came as a prince. He came as a son. Do you know what a prince does? They serve the king and the people. The true prince. The spoilt brat princes. I'm not going to go any further on that. Any thoughts I've ever had in my life about that. You know, they're in it for themselves. But the true prince or the true princess, they serve the king and the people. That's why Diana will always be my hero. That's why she was the people's princess. That's why you could find her at 3 o'clock in the morning in Great Ormond Street Hospital sitting at the bedside of kids that were dying of AIDS and cancer. Because she knew who she was. And she knew that as she served the people, when she walked in the room, that room changed. He didn't come as a religious leader. He didn't come to get us camping over here in religion. He didn't come as a political leader to have us camping over here. He came as a prince to serve the king and to serve the people. And he grew. He grew in favor with God and man. And even in that, I believe there is an incredible tension. And I believe it's a tension that's actually linked to the religious spirit and the political spirit. Now, I have a theory. I can't prove it, and I'm not a theologian, but I have a theory. So I'm going to share my theory. You can do with it what you will, and if you disagree with me, that's great, because we're going to live in tension and we're going to love each other. And that tension will actually cause us to grow together. It really will. Jesus grew in favor with God and man. My theory is this. He was fully God and fully man. Is everyone okay with that? I believe that the Jesus, the man, had to grow in favor with God. And Jesus, the God, had to grow in favor with man. Jesus, the man, he didn't need to grow in favor with man. That would have been political. Jesus, the God, didn't need to grow in favor with God. That would have been religion. But Jesus, the man, had to grow in favor with God. And Jesus, the God, had to grow in favor with man. I believe it's true of us. Now, I don't know whether that's a complete understanding. It's just my thought. But that's true of me. You see, the man in me, I don't need to grow in favor with man. That's the political spirit. I need to grow in favor with God. I need to grow in my favor, my relationship with him. But the God in me, the Christ in me, the hope of glory, needs to grow in favor with man. Because man needs to recognize in me God. That's how I have to grow. The man in me growing in favor with man is a political spirit, and the God in me growing in favor with God is me believing that I can work my way there. It's a tension. It's a tension that Jesus lived and Jesus walked and he modeled for us and he showed us. Divine order. There are so many examples. Salvation's divine order. But it's not ducks in a row. Karen, who works for me, her husband Josh, an ex-Chicago gangster, working out in a gym on his own, one person in a gym at 1 o'clock in the morning in Chicago. And a man about to go to bed gets woken up by God and told, there's a guy called Josh in a gym and he's ready to meet you now. That's divine order. Because that's a man who lived in the tension of heaven and earth and yesterday and tomorrow, who heard something for a moment and acted upon it. And he lived in the tension, and tension caused him to do something. And he went probably with fear and trembling and trepidation into a gymnasium and approached a Chicago gangster and said, hey, is your name Josh? You're ready to meet God. He just told me. That is seriously the God in him growing in favor with man. Jacob, divine order. Chris was messing around with Jacob last night. I'm sitting there going, Jacob, that's intriguing. Last time everyone was talking about Moses. We'll have some Jacob this time. I have Jacob in my notes. Jacob's incredible divine order. Stunning divine order. There's this guy called Deceiver. He has some wrestles with angels. Names get changed and stuff like that. Has 4 wives. 12 sons from 4 wives, and God calls the fruit of that the model of government for all eternity. Somebody else would have made 12 sects out of that. But God took the 12 sons, the 12 tribes, and called them Israel. And it all began with Sarah. Now, my pronunciation, the theologians in it, I'm sorry. But if you look at the word Sarah in Hebrew, it's kind of Sarah, means princess. If you look at Israel, it's Is-Raw, is the way it's written. And you look at the word for government, it's Misraw. And they're all related words. And you have Sarah, a princess, who's a mother of a prince, whose name is Israel, who has 12 sons from 4 women, who become the model, the picture for government for all eternity. And one definition of the word government is the power to rule as a prince. Not the power to rule as a religious leader, not the power to rule as a political leader, but the power to rule as a prince who sits between heaven and earth, who learns how to serve the Father, the King, and who learns how to serve the people, and who lives in the divine tension, but he's able to access that. Divine order, an incredible picture of divine order in Jacob's life. This is just a throwaway. This is for you, Benny. This is weird. I looked up son, house, and Israel in my concordance, and they're all 1,000 times. And 1,000, I believe, is absolute divine completion. I don't really understand that. I just thought it was a fun little interlude to my message. But it's weird. Don't you think it's weird? 1,000, exactly 1,000. There's something in that, though. There's something about the son and the house and Israel. There's a progression there of divine completion in learning to be sons who steward the house, who transform nations. The power to rule as princes. The power to stand and to live and to occupy a place of divine tension. And we have been given, I believe, an invitation to live in tension. I believe we've been given an invitation. An invitation. And as we embrace the teaching of all the team, what Danny was saying, of looking to the next generation and empowering them and releasing them. You see, what have we done in the past? We've said, this move of God looks like this, and what you're doing over there, son, that can't possibly be God. But Jesus said the most outrageous thing. He said, greater works will you do. That's divine order. Divine order for this moment in time is that we stand and look to the next generation and say, greater works will you do? Go get some fresh water and pour it under the door of the temple. Find your stream, your water. Empower them, release them, let them find their own fresh experiences and expressions with God, their own ways of ministering on this planet, their own ways of displaying His glory, whether they're in Hollywood or hospitals or wherever it is. We've been given an invitation, I believe, to live in tension. And the challenge I have is this, that if we shut down the tension, we will stop moving. And we'll die. And if you don't have mysteries, and if you don't have potential for disappointment, and if you don't have potential to be offended at God, I want to suggest this to you. You don't have enough tension in your life. And you're not living intentionally enough. Your life's not being stretched out enough. And I tell you, the first crusade I do, I am going to be scared. But I'm going to do it. And these guys, Chris and Bill, they stretch us every week. They get our bows, our violins, they string us so that we can fire that bow or play that song. We've been invited to live in tension, a culture of living in tension. Bill says, if you have no mystery in your Christian life, you've reduced your God to your level of understanding. And I always add to that, which means you're worshiping you, which is a really bad idea. A really bad idea. You must have mystery. You must be doing things that risk being disappointed. I sat on the floor in India with 4 people with polio. I prayed for them one night and I was disappointed. Nothing happened night 1. I went back to the hotel and I laid on that bed and I prayed and I said, God, what's the answer? Because that tension created a pull on heaven that gave me the energy which Kevin somewhere is here, that one of those is now walking very well, and the others are getting there. I'm just saying we're meant to live in that place. Look for the tension. Where do you find tension? It's things that don't make sense. It's where people are criticizing you. Bill is a genius. You knew that? He is a genius. Bill, when he turns the other cheek, he always attaches a check to it. He does. Somebody slaps him, he goes, hey, have this one. There's a check. Because he lives in that place of tension, and he taps the energy that's in that tension. In that place of criticism, he taps that energy for divine order to happen, for relationships in cities not to be separated but to be united. He taps that energy, that moment. We have opportunities to find that tension in our lives. And I encourage you to release that energy. That energy is released when you love your enemies, when you hope in the wilderness, when you have faith when you can't see, when you're loyal in disagreement, when you honor when it's undeserved, and when you trust before it's reciprocated. All of those, they create tension. But in that tension, there's an energy that will pull the divine order of heaven. I've probably got a book here that I could preach on, but hey, I'll wrap up just with a few closing things. Divine order, it's animate. It brings life. It attracts the presence. I want to tell you this. Any order that does not attract or is not led by the presence of God cannot be viewed as divine. It is probably just a list. Divine order exists in heaven first. Divine order creates life. And divine order, it actually comes from the very guts of God, His zeal. Divine order is concerned with outcome. It's not the result of hindsight, but it's a God of Romans 8:28. It doesn't always make sense with human understanding alone. And we're being invited into places of favor. We have opportunities all over the world. And my challenge to you is this: let's keep the tension. Let's learn to live in tension. And relationships are the key to learning to live in tension. When I value my relationship with somebody more than I do being right, I am able to live in a place of tension. And I believe we've created a theology of a God that we don't know in favor of an order we understand, which did not come from Him, in favor of a relationship with a God that we do know, and a dynamic order that's full of mystery requiring faith. I want to challenge you to embrace the tension, challenge you to not slip into building boxes and walls that divide. I want to challenge you to look for every place in your life where there is tension and to examine it for the energy, because that energy is available to pull heaven to earth, the divine order of heaven, and pull it to earth. And I want to close by this. About 4 or 5 weeks ago, I can't remember exactly, this guy was leading worship with Stephanie Frizzell. And in the week before, I had been in second year school of ministry and I'd been teaching, and I just quoted that verse, "Your steps are ordered by the Lord." And as I did, I heard the Lord say, "And sometimes they're a dance." I'd never thought that before, and I was here on a Sunday morning. Jeremy led the most passionate 8:30 worship there can possibly have ever been on the face of planet Earth in the history of time. We was dancing for your glory up here in the first service, and I did the iBethel TV intro, and I tell them all, it's amazing. Tune into the worship. It's incredible. And I'm closing worship, second service, and I'm on the front row. And we sang, we will dance for your glory, and it was glorious. And I'm okay, God, how do I close? And he just reminded me, he said, go up there. Your steps are ordered by the Lord, but sometimes they're a dance. And at that moment, that precise moment, Stephanie Frizzell, you're the Lord of the dance. You're the dancing Lord. And I did what I don't think I've ever done here. I went to Eric and I said, I need to go up now. And I came up now, and I just started releasing something about dance. I think dance is one of the greatest pictures of divine order. You see, we think our steps are ordered by the Lord, but sometimes they're a dance. The amazing thing about that day, which encouraged me no end, was I had no idea that Ben Cantillon, who wrote the first song, was in the house. I think I really do believe I tapped him in the room. There was an increase on that. He wants to dance whatever melody is in your heart. He really does. He can dance the last waltz and the first dance. He can dance the foxtrot, the salsa, or as I would love to learn to do, and dance the tango on the streets of Buenos Aires. It's just one of those little secret dreams that is now no longer secret. But I can't dance it, so I'd have to learn first. But I saw that in Buenos Aires. It's the most romantic thing I've ever seen. Your steps are ordered by the Lord. Your steps are ordered by the Lord. Your steps are ordered by the Lord. He has prepared your life for our pleasure, for our joy, for our delight, to discover everything that He has. The divine order in your life will be different today than mine. The divine order in Latvia will be different than divine order in India. But we need to learn to live in tension, to not to succumb to the opposition and bow down and stop standing for what we believe, but learn to live in those distinctives, but at the same time learn to do relationship. And if it requires a check on your cheek, then do that. And so I want to invite you to stand to close. So I want to invite you to live in tension. I want to invite you to make a commitment to live in tension. If you stop moving, you atrophy. If you atrophy, you die. If the river stops flowing, it becomes a swamp. And the tragedy is that there are revival movements in the history of revival that are swamps and have died. And I don't know about you, but I would like to leave a well that is overflowing. I don't want to leave one that somebody has to redig. So, Father, I ask right now that you would refresh every one of us with the courage to live in tension. And in that tension, to access the energy of heaven and the energy to live. That everything that moves will live. That we choose as a body, as a people, as a part of a movement, we choose to live in tension. Because we know that without tension, we stop moving. And without movement, we stop living. And Father, it is our heart's cry that this will be a movement that never stops, that never ends. That the river gets deeper the further from the temple it flows, and it never stops flowing. Father, we just ask right now, and I ask if there's anyone in here who right now feels that you've judged, you've positioned yourself in any way in judgment, in elitism, in any way, just to repent of that in your own heart. It's just an opportunity to do that. That if in any place that there has been a place in your life of division, that you just put that before the Lord and you just ask Him to heal that place of division. You may have done everything you knew to do. You may have done everything right. I know many you have. But what I believe He wants to do is to get our hearts ready. I believe He wants to retune us today, to recalibrate, as it were, to tighten the strings on the bow, that the arrows that we fire are true and go further than they have ever gone before, that the song that we play with our heartstrings is the harmony of heaven, and that we stop being afraid of tension, we stop being afraid of it, and actually we do the complete opposite and we embrace it for the honor of your name. We embrace tension. We believe it's actually the way you designed this planet. You designed it. You designed us to live in this place of tension. And teach us, Father, how to do relationship. Teach us how to do it so that we can sustain that tension and be a part of a revival that never ends for the honor of your name, Jesus. Amen.